Oh my god, I get to play with Method? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Shadowlands Alpha. Taking a quick look here at the Resto Druid. A couple of changes, nothing major. You should be fine. Some good stuff, actually. Let's start with one that's going to be a bit odd for you coming into this, is that Swiftmend does consume a hot now. Again, the way it used to work. Now, what this means is for dropping Swiftmend on the tank, you're going to be able to do that anytime you want. Just to pay attention to which hot it is consumed. It'll consume a regrowth or a rejuve. It'll pick, and then it'll take one away. What it does mean, though, is you can't just Swiftmend randomly, right? You can't just Swiftmend a member of your team who is suddenly taking a burst of damage. They need a hot on them for it to work. So you're going to have to pay attention to that a little bit more than what you had to in BFA, which is all welcome in my mind. The one other thing they brought back is Nourish. They really weren't happy with regrowth spam, I don't think, because regrowth is supposed to be a heal that then gives a heal over time. And obviously, if you're down to just spamming regrowth in those times where you do need to do that, then you're just missing out on the hot part, because you're just trying to get that burst healing section out of it. So they have given you the talent option of bringing Nourish back. Personally, didn't find it that useful. Regrowth spam, certainly we only have access to one dungeon, which is where you're going to have the healing. The point where I'm regrowth spamming is kind of every now and again. It's like a couple of trash packs and maybe a couple of moments during bosses. Didn't feel it was worthy of a full talent. It might be worth just throwing that back into the basic toolkit. Then I would have made definitely the good use of it. I do like that it takes a massive bonus from your harmony. So the idea is that once you have got a target all hotted up and is still dying, that you're not supposed to just default down to regrowth spamming. So if you are in those situations, or it's something that feels necessary to you, like maybe in PvP and stuff like that, then maybe you want to throw in some Nourish as a talent. One thing I'm really happy about now I've mentioned PvP is that Overgrowth has had a promotion, moving from the PvP talent tree into the main section. It's alongside Spring Blossoms. If you never played with Overgrowth because you didn't do any PvP, it's a 1-minute cooldown that throws every hot onto the target, including the wild growth hots. It's really powerful. Very, very cool. I loved using this when I did my PvP for Conflict and Strife, and I'm really happy to see this thrown into the main toolkit. I'm hoping it finds some use. It does share a row within a piece for the less tranquility, and of course the Spring Blossoms for keeping that efflorescence down. So maybe in dungeons and stuff like that, I played around with it with a little bit. Personally, even with a group of 5, I prefer Spring Blossoms for the heavy AoE we're seeing in this first dungeon. But we have many more dungeons to come, so that should be something we keep an eye out. The zone ability that we get access to, we do only have access to Bastion at this time. It's not particularly good for Druids. It's the Symbiosis extra bit of buff and stats. It's not particularly great, so we'll look forward to checking that later down the line when a more interesting one comes along, in order to gauge all the new things and the new soul binds and stuff like that. That will come a little bit later in the alpha cycle, so don't worry about it. I will give special mention here to the ability to buff yourself in some way with Heart of the Wild returning, which grants an extra bonus to the affinity that you've chosen. For Resto, personally, I didn't think it was worthwhile over Mighty Bash or Mass Entanglement. Mighty Bash, again, particularly in the dungeon we're using, is really useful. And as a healer, you tend to not slip into a different role unless it's like DPS. So for higher end Mythic Plus, you might see a lot of, say, Feral Affinity Heart of the Wild or Balance Affinity Heart of the Wild, a 5-minute cooldown in order to put out extreme damage for a short period of time. But for me, I didn't want to lose those CC options as a healer, because I know, and there's some battle mages in this dungeon that are really nasty, and if you get a group with bad interrupters, which has happened to me a few times, being able to stun them down, it saves you like half a mana bar. Like, it's that good. But obviously with a better group, that's going to be less of an issue, where you can then maybe tune into something else. So for the moment, Heart of the Wild, less useful to maybe the more casual player, but as you get better, something to definitely look forward to is being able to go into that Super Saiyan mode like we used to and play around with it there. Overall, though, if you like the BFA Resto Druid, you're not going to struggle to move into the Shadowlands Resto Druid. One thing that is nice is having multiple CC options. I think that is something we should give credence to, is that you can pick up, say, Incapacitating Raw with your Ursul's Vortex, with your Mighty Bash. You feel way more useful that way, picking up these extra tools. If you pick up the Balance Affinity, you get Typhoon, things like that. And if you Feral, you get Maim. You get all these extra CC options that you're kind of lacking a little bit in the BFA. So that gives you a more rounded toolkit. So healing's become this is something you need to concentrate on a little bit more and be aware of a couple of little things. but then you've gained all these other options to be more useful to your group. So far, a thumbs up from me.